Chapter 3. The old disheveled miner was transforming before their eyes. Black flakes fell from his hair, leaving glowing, bright white strands in its place. His pupils were as big as before, but the color of his eyes had changed to a sharp, crystal-clear gold. More startling was the fact that a second iris had appeared, of the same color, with a small gap of white between the two rings. The man's age reversed as a dusty film disintegrated off his face. His back and posture straightened, raising his height. Uli put Kvar somewhere in his 20s. Young, but his face showed a maturity that he hadn't seen in many 20-year-olds. The Sirak, having traveled to a few systems and received a somewhat decent education on galactic and racial history, knew what he was. Drazian, bellowed Uli. Kvar smiled. The 20 or so bloodcloaks began to wake up from their state of stupor and looked to Bor for direction, except Flass. Flass ran. Uli thought out the situation. There's a handful of them left? Why would one be on this godforsaken planet? Drazia was destroyed 10 years ago, meaning that he would have been around 15 at the time. How did he get off Drazia? More importantly, how is he still alive? However, Khaldun is outside the net, not closely monitored, and is rumored to have ancient objects here left by some lost Hyligan outpost. Maybe it does make sense after all. The perfect place for a fugitive. So is that what hangs around his neck? A Hyligan artifact? A Drazian. Do you know the reward on those suckers? Come on, boys. We're set for life now, rallied Bor. Uli was bowled to the side by Bor, who rushed by him with sword in full thrust. When he was within arm's length, he lunged the scimitar towards Kvar's heart. Uli got up from the ground and saw that Bor's sword was stuck inside a thick column of sand, which had spurted from the ground like a geyser. Bor let go of his trapped sword and drew a dagger from the inside of his cloak. Why, you damned sorcerer! As Bor prepared to leap forward, his feet suddenly were pushed forward and he fell to the ground hard on his back, his blade landing in the sand, out of reach. The sand around Bor began to shift, and then long, white bones protruded from the ground around him, enclosing his body. They appeared to be the rib cage of some large beast. The bones tightened and began to pull downwards, retreating back into the sand, taking their prey with them. The screams of Bor turned into a thick choke, then subsided as he disappeared from sight. For a few seconds, the sand continued to move and bubble. Then it returned to the previously undisturbed position, and any sign of a scuffle was gone. Taking his bow off his back, Nock loosed an arrow. It hit a tall sand wall, which formed momentarily, then crumbled away seconds later. The small dagger, which was the only remnant of Bor's existence, slowly slid along the sand towards Kvar. From his eyes and facial expression, he was putting a lot of concentration on the blade, following it closely. The cross-like gold object hanging from his neck was glowing slightly. The sand and dagger rose up over his hips, surrounded his hands, and when the sand receded, his ropes fell severed to the ground. "A sand manipulator," cried Nock, who turned and ran back towards the base. The other bloodcloaks followed, except for Uli, who stayed, unmoving. Kvar crouched next to the priest, watching for a few seconds. Then he put his hand on the Krishish blade and began to pull. Sparks flew from both the ankh and the blade. Kvar strained under the influence, and sweat beaded on his face. His progress was very slow, as if the blade had a tremendous weight. After a good minute, the blade finally pulled free with a resounding crack and a grand shower of sparks that rained down onto the sand. Kvar ripped off the priest's cloak and wrapped the triangular blade, tucking it into his miner's uniform. Upon releasing direct contact with the blade, Kvar's complexion greatly improved, and the gold ankh stopped glowing. A large pool of blood formed around the now still priest. Your body may be dying. Your mind may be fried, But your essence is still there, damaged and animal-like. But still there, Kvar said to himself. The Drazian reached back behind his neck and grabbed the thick gold chain. Kvar's eyes glowed bright momentarily, and the chain uncoupled, releasing the Ankh to his hand. This, my friend, is the Ankh of Atok. I will use it to help you, since you have helped me so. Whether you want my help, well, that's another question. Kvar grabbed the priest's hand and wrapped it around the Ankh, then shoved it into the sand. Kvar wrapped his own fingers around the loop at the top of the Ankh and went into deep meditation. Uli watched the Drazian perform his ritual. The Ankh then shone so bright that Uli had to hold his hand out to block it out. He watched as the priest's body became rigid. His skin became darker and freckled. Then the Ankh flashed so brightly that Uli lost vision momentarily. When it returned, he saw with surprise that the priest's body had become a lump of sand, but still retained its human shape. Suddenly, the Ankh released a massive blast, and Kvar was thrown back. His left arm was on fire with a strange gold-white flame that danced along his skin. He frantically thrust it into the sand, putting it out, wincing. Kvar slowly stood up, examined his arm, then walked over and reattached the Ankh. Uli made a fist with his right hand, drawing it across his chest, straightening his posture. Left hand clenched tightly along his side, and his right foot slid backwards as he bowed his head. An ellipter salute. Drazian, I surrender myself to you. I am well versed in intergalactic cultures, having lived on 4 systems, and was once a Sirak rebel commander. I can fly class. Kvar raised his hand. Shh, you will miss the show. He walked towards the crest of the dune, a few steps away from the post. From here, the desert unfolded for reaches and reaches. Uli saw his fellow bloodcloaks arrive at camp. The desert quieted. The wind lulled. Then the ground began to tremble and quake. Rivulets of sand flowed down the dunes towards the bottom. Movement caught Uli's eye as he focused his attention on the nearby Kudurru skeleton. The massive, bright white ribcage was sinking into the sand, and after a minute had completely vanished from sight. Uli glanced at Kvar, wondering if this was his doing. Kvar looked out into the desert, face emotionless, eyes almost looking sad. What the hell happened back there? Panted Nock, upon returning to camp. He looked at the other bloodcloaks, who were also out of breath. They were not accustomed to running. Where's Floss? He ordered in Vex tent, Remy replied while making some religious gesture and mumbling about his Chaldunian god Aark. Nock hurried over to Vex tent. Floss, you've been off planet. What was that? Is he a demon like Vec? Bor, my god, Bor, spouted Nock. You took off right away. Floss looked up. Uli said he was Drazian. I don't know much about them, except that they're nearly extinct. That any living Drazian is the most wanted person in the galaxy. I heard a story once that a Reld stalker trio had locked onto Kudurru. You know, the mass murderer who was responsible for the Mare Tree massacre. Well, anyways, they had locked him down, started the circle of death, rods extended and all. No one has ever escaped that. Some Drazian went through a federated gate on the same planet. I think it was Abos. The Relic Stalkers instantly received the alert. With only a moment's hesitation, they stopped the march midway and pursued the Drazian. Kudurru escaped. But I did hear that they later got the Drazian. That is the only time that the circle of death was broken and the entrapped escaped. So what do we do? We're dead, aren't we? Asked Nock. No, most Drazians are weak, like us. From what I've heard, only a handful of them are true Drazians. This is a young one. He probably isn't as powerful or knowledgeable. However, it seems he does have some control of nature. What we need to do is look around for a green-blue box thing with tubes coming out of it. Vec had one here once. We need it now, replied Floss. Hey, guys, have a look at the dunes, called Remy. Nock turned his attention to the dunes and saw the sand shifting, pouring down. He suddenly became aware of the oscillations coursing through the sand, then looked around. On the top of the dune near the post, he saw two small silhouettes. The Drazian and who was the other person? Nock mumbled. Then there was a thunderous roar, like that of a powerful waterfall. Except that there are no waterfalls on Khaldun, at least none that Nock had ever seen. He looked around and finally found the source of the sound. To the left of Kvar, and close to the Bloodcloak camp, a geyser was spewing out sand. All the Bloodcloaks now stood and watched this phenomenon. Two large tusks burst out of the churning sand volcano, followed by an enormous skull, even larger than those of the Kudurru. Beyond the skull came two big limbs, made up of white bones in the golden desert sand. They were asymmetrical and of different heights and sizes. Then came a massive rib cage. It looked like the one they had run through before. Inside the rib cage was a large quantity of sand, held together by some unseen force. The last two legs came out of the geyser, and the sand volcano subsided, becoming one with the surroundings. The enormous bone-sand creature began a slow trundle towards camp. As the monstrosity barreled for them, two more tusks emerged on the top of the head, giving the appearance of horns. It was something out of a nightmare. "Holy shit," yelled Flas. "What the fuck is that?" replied Nock. "I have no idea." "What shall we do?" "Remy, Pune, man the ballista," ordered Flas. "Nock, help me find the box thing." The two Bloodcloaks mounted the ballista, the only long-range defense in the camp, and loaded one of its large harpoons. Nock watched as they took careful aim at the beast. The harpoon was loosened. The sonically forged iron tip hit the beast right in the head, dislodging a massive chunk of sand and bone. The creature's left tusk fell to the ground with a resounding thud. The beast reared its head, then stared directly at the crew manning the ballista, and stepped forward. Nock looked around the tent, spotting the green box under a canvas. "I found it," yelled Nock. "Where?" "Oh, you did. Good job, Nock. Help me lift it up," said Floss as they set it on the table. "What is it?" "Federation communicator. Came off a Ronin-class cruiser," replied Floss. He flipped a switch and typed a few commands into the keypad, causing the box to light up, giving off a high-pitched whine. "Get me our location. Grab the intergalactic map book over there." "On it," said Nock as he flipped through the pages. The ground was shaking, and he could hear Bloodcloaks screaming outside, as well as the sound of cloth tearing. Flas got to work quickly. "All right, Drazian, you think you're smart, huh?" "No one fucks with me," he laughed, then proceeded to type into the communicator. "Attention. Drazian confirmed on planet Khaldun, outer Varings. Repeat, Drazian. Great Basin Region. Grid location, J9, D6, X2, E4, C7. Check scanners to confirm authenticity of this message. Will find Krishish wrench used in area. Come quickly." As Floss hit send, there was a sudden crash, and a piece of debris tore a huge gash in the tent. He looked down and saw Pune sprawled on the ground, his face and body crushed. Every bone looked like it was broken. Blood was streaming in all directions. Floss approached the hole in the tent and looked out. There were bits of wood and blood everywhere. Tents were crunched and some were even on fire. Black smoke billowed in spirals to his right. He stared at the smoke for a few seconds, entranced by the thick fumes, when all of a sudden they parted, and the sand monstrosity burst through, barreling straight towards Vex's tent. Floss's eyes widened as he saw Remy impaled on the creature's remaining main tusk. With each gallop the creature took, his corpse slid forwards and backwards, leaving fresh blood smears on ivory-white tusk. "Nock, look for some weapon we can use." He stopped. Vex's tent canvas was pulled up, and both Floss and Nock looked up to see it hanging on the tip of the beast's tusk. It hovered over them, and Floss was able to truly see the beast. The legs were covered in bones, but they had also melded together, creating a unified bone. Above its 4 mammoth legs was a humongous torso that looked like a barrel, with a Kudurru ribcage on the outside, and rock-hard sand for skin, which for some reason was on the inside of the ribcage. Sand spilled and dripped from the damaged portion of the beast's head. It seemed, however, as if the sand was hardening, almost healing. Sand for insides and bone for the outsides. It was a nightmare. It had to be. Things like this don't exist. Drazians can't do this. Neither can any Ron wielder. Not that he had ever seen. It's impossible. The creature lowered its head, and Floss was able to see a set of bone pincers and a mouth full of teeth. No. Ayark, help me. The creature lifted him into the air and flung him into the cave full of teeth. Nock whimpered below at each crunch and crackle as bits of blood and floss fell onto him. Looking around desperately, he spotted a sand speeder. There was no other option. Time to run. He sprinted to the speeder, quickly mounting it, pushing it as fast as his legs would allow. The beast had not yet spotted him. About 30 seconds into his ride, the sand began to rumble again, and he turned to see the beast trundling towards him. Nearing top speed, he spun sand faster and faster, climbing over dune after dune. He shot a glance behind and let out another cry uncontrollably. The Kudurru monster was gaining speed, closing in on him. "Shit," exhaled Nock as his speeder veered right into a large rock. Nock went flying and landed in the sand. "Ayark be damned. I should have never left Dunok. They don't have any fucking Kudurruns or Drazians or fucking bird creature sorcerers." Nock, still laying in the position he had landed in, stared outwards at the sand hopelessly. Fucking desert. Something shifted next to him, and a mound of sand rose up slightly. Nock stared at it for a few seconds. Then his eyes widened, and he sprang to his feet, running to it. With 2 hands and wild eyes, he grabbed the brambler's tail, pulled and threw as hard as he could. With a yap and a howl, the brambler flew backwards. But one of its claws hooked Nock's right eye as he turned his head into the throw, cutting it deeply. Nock, unfazed, dove headfirst into the brambler's den and wormed himself as deep as he could, waiting, heart pounding and blood streaming out of his right eye. The brambler angrily started her way back to her den, but was thrown in the air slightly. Landing, she quickly turned just in time to see a large white tusk coming at her. The brambler jumped to the left and felt pain in her tail as the tusk pincered it to the sand. She jumped forward, ripping off the tail and a lot of hair. The brambler howled, then swiped and took a bite at the tusk. The monstrosity pulled the tusk out of the sand and raised its head, trying to shake off the brambler. On the 3rd shake, it was successful, and the brambler flew off. The creature watched with its unseen eyes as the brambler landed on a dune, got up and howled. The brambler saw the creature start charging her and decided that this time she would run. Nock heard the creature's footsteps fall away and breathed a sigh of relief. He decided he would hide for another hour or so, just to be safe. Kvar watched the beast trundle off after some small critter. He surveyed the destruction and carnage before him. "How far away can you control it?" asked Uli, who for some reason was still breathing. "Control?" The Drazian motioned towards the sand heap where the war priest had been. Uli looked back and forth between the sand clump and the nearly out-of-sight beast. "You mean, that's the preacher?" "More or less. I simply transferred his life essence from one body into another. The beast's form, I imagined. Its thoughts and behavior, however, is the preacher's alone. I was a little worried the thing might turn on us. Surely you could take it. You made it after all. Plus, you can control sand. My powers are not as great as they would seem." Uli looked at the destroyed camp, skeptical. "Listen, I understand this planet and how it moves. We Drazians have a tie to nature and the environment. When connected with it, it's like having an extra limb. My thoughts flow into it, and sometimes I can get it to obey me. However, more times than not, it doesn't work. What you saw back there was not my normal powers. I was in a superior state of being, charged only by adrenaline and the previous circumstances. It is highly spiritual and pure will. I've only done it a few times in my life. Oh, and that creature? That was all because of this Ankh. No Drazian could do that. Kvar stood silent for a few moments. It's like there's another person locked away in the depths of your mind, stuck inside a cage, only to be released in the direst of circumstances. To be quite honest, I think that person is caged for a good reason. Before I left, I learned that it exists in all my people, but most have never summoned it. First, that person must be acknowledged, then found, then understood. Or at least it needs to be understood somewhat. I'm not sure if anyone completely understands it. But anyways, most people on my planet were too busy with life, too distracted, worrying about their lives and trying to be happy. Yeah, I'm aware of those types. We had plenty in the Sirak Empire. Completely useless, replied Uli. It's not entirely their fault. I understand how it happens. Over time, it has become part of the core human code. It's one of the reasons they're all dead today. How did you escape it? Born outside it, I guess. I was a student of Drasis, one of the Ray Lords. Uli's eyes went big at the name. Have you heard of him? Asked Kvar. The Sirak nodded. Of course he knew the Ray Lords, with Prochoron being one of the most recognizable names in the universe. He was infamous among every Tier 3 system and above. Uli knew more than that, however. He had also heard of Drasis. I was at a Sirak bar once, and a Goldman told me all about the Drazian Ray Lords. Kvar smiled and looked at Uli. Tell it to me as you've heard it. I've always wondered what other civilizations think about my people, specifically the Ray Lords. All right, but I don't guarantee this Goldman's accuracy. Once, before the onslaught of Drazia, there were 5 brothers: Prochoron, Drasis, Chiron, Verasimus, and Ire. Now they are known as the Ray Lords, after their father, Talgon Reyes. He decided to specially train his children, hiding them away. The first and oldest was Drasis, the keeper of secrets and the guardian of the gates. Uli took a breath, watching Kvar anxiously, gauging his reactions. Prochoron. Prochoron was the face of violence and destruction. He advocated for war against the Federation, as well as many planets and races which he deemed stagnant and infected with cowardice. His faction was a dangerous group. Their attacks and assassinations changed more history in the 5 years they were active than the 150 years before that. His name is known throughout the systems as one of the most powerful persons in the modern era. Chiron, the elected leader of Drazia and representative to the Federation, promoted peace and fought against violence and war at all costs. It was Chiron who eventually helped the Federation take down Prochoron. And we both know what happened after that. With Prochoron gone, the Federation moved in, with the Salaf ships leading the attack. Well, then there was Verasimus, the Tinkerer, and he... Uli stopped, noticing Kvar's lack of attention. What the hell? Kvar exclaimed, pointing towards a red comet slowly descending in spirals from the heavens towards the ground, leaving a red dust trail behind it. Uli paled. His cheek twitched a few times uncontrollably. Oh, God. Relg.